She was cleaning floors in space. Then the alien emperor's Heir chose her to sleep. She used to joke that her life could be summed up by the swish of a MOPI in the bright, antiseptic corridors of Orbital Station Epsilon. Sarah Morgan guided her mop across a mirror-like floor, the reflection of her plain face stretching in the polished surface every few steps. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and recycled oxygen. She was one human maintenance worker among hundreds, just one more set of hands keeping the Empire's machinery shining. The alien overlords hardly noticed her. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. They walked past in their tall, elegant bodies with the unconcern of gods striding through a temple. The Theassians, rulers of a sprawling interstellar empire, had skin that shimmered silver blue like liquid metal, long limbs, and faces that looked eerily like old paintings of angels. Beautiful, distant, untouchable. For black, gemlike eyes watched everything and nothing at once. 15 years earlier, their massive warships had filled Earth's sky. The war had ended exactly how everyone expected. Humanity crushed in record time. But the aliens had not burned Earth or turned cities to rubble. They did something more chilling. They folded Earth into their empire as an asset. Humans became what the Empire deemed them fit for. Support staff, cleaners, cooks, technicians, low-level analysts. Useful, not important. For 3 years now, Sarah had been mopping floors and scrubbing bulkheads on Epsilon, a remote way station along a quiet trade route. The work was tiring, but the pay was better than anything she could get planet-side, and she sent almost every credit home to her younger brother, Jason, who was clawing his way through medical school. One of the few professions where humans were slowly being allowed into real positions. Maintenance worker. Cease activity. The command cut across her thoughts like a shard of broken glass. The voice was melodically sharp, the tones harmonizing with one another in that unnerving alien way. Sarah immediately propped the mop upright and turned. A female Theassian stood in the middle of the corridor, towering over Sarah by nearly 2 feet. Her robes were white, edged in intricate gold symbols that even Sarah recognized. Imperial insignia. A high-ranking official. Someone from the royal household. Sarah dropped her gaze slightly, careful not to hold the alien's multiple eyes for too long. "Yes, Administrator," she said, keeping her voice respectful and steady. "You are to report to the Imperial Suite at once," the Administrator said. "You have been selected for special duty." Sarah's mind blanked. The Imperial Suite? There must be some mistake. There is no mistake. The Administrator flicked one long-fingered hand, dismissing the protest. "You were specifically requested. Follow." Sarah's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She left the mop in its bucket and fell in a step behind the tall alien, moving through corridors she'd only ever seen marked on schematics. Security presence thickened as they approached the central spire where the station's most prestigious guests stayed. The guards were Theassian elite, their armor the same bluish sheen as their skin, faces hidden behind crystalline visors. Sarah knew each weapon they carried could turn her to vapor in an instant. They passed through a final security checkpoint, then into a breathtaking antechamber. The ceiling arched up into a transparent dome that didn't just show space. It felt like stepping onto a balcony over the stars. The walls flickered with living circuitry, muted colors drifting in response to unseen signals. The floor under her boots felt strangely soft, as if it responded to her weight, adjusting itself at a microscopic level. Several high-ranking Theassians clustered near the far side of the room, speaking in low, layered harmonies. When Sarah entered, the conversation cut off. 8 black eyes focused on her at once. "This is the human," a male asked, his voice resonant, echoing with the formal tones of the upper class. "She appears ordinary. She is the maintenance worker responsible for the nursery deck," the Administrator replied. "She is the one the prince responds to." Before Sarah could even process what that meant, the group parted, and she found herself face-to-face with the ruler whose image had once glowed on every conquering ship. The Emperor. Emperor Zerandes was taller than any Theassian she'd ever seen, close to 8 feet, his silver-blue skin glowing with a deeper luminance, like starlight trapped beneath the surface. His 4 eyes held a depth that made Sarah feel as if entire galaxies were studying her. His garments were simple, a robe of midnight blue without the heavy ornamentation she'd expected, marked only by a thin band of platinum at his brow. He was cradling a small Theassian child. The little one squirmed and emitted a keening, high-pitched sound that cut straight through Sarah's nerves. It took her a second to realize it was the alien equivalent of a baby crying. Human, the Emperor said, his voice surprisingly gentle, with a low harmony vibrating under the main tone. My son refuses to sleep. He has not rested in 3 full cycles, not since we boarded this station. His caretakers have exhausted every remedy within their knowledge. Sarah swallowed. I'm sorry to hear that, Your Imperial Majesty, but I don't understand what that has to do with. One of the nursery staff observed something on the monitoring system. The Emperor continued, unfazed. The Prince calms only when you're present on the adjacent observation deck. When you are near, his distress abates. Memories flickered through Sarah's mind, cleaning the observation deck, humming softly to herself, an old Earth lullaby her mother used to sing. She hadn't even known anyone was on the other side of the glass. We speculate there's something about your human biofield. Another advisor said quietly, your pheromones, your vocal frequencies. Something unique to your species that soothes him. Before she could muster a response, the Emperor did something that made every Theassian in the room tense. He stepped forward and held out his son. Will you hold him? Zorandes asked. Just for a moment. Sarah's pulse roared in her ears. Refusal was unthinkable, even if it had been offered as an actual choice, which it wasn't. Hands trembling slightly, she reached out and accepted the small alien child. He was lighter than a human toddler, his skin cool and velvety like polished stone. The moment Sarah settled him against her chest, the piercing, keening cut off. Her black eyes blinked up at her, wet with unshed tears. Tiny, 4-fingered hands clutched at the fabric of her worn maintenance uniform. His breathing slowed, the tension bleeding out of his limbs. Remarkable, one of the advisors whispered. Complete cessation of distress indicators. The Emperor's gaze sharpened. Human, what is your designation? Sarah Morgan, Your Imperial Majesty, she managed, forcing her voice to stay calm. Station Maintenance, Sanitation Division. Sarah Morgan. He repeated her name slowly, his accent giving each syllable a musical cadence. From this moment, your duties are reassigned. For the duration of our stay on Epsilon, you will serve as my son's rest attendant. You will be compensated accordingly. It was phrased as a request, but everyone in the room knew it was an imperial command. I would be honored, Your Majesty, Sarah said quietly. The little prince had already nuzzled against her shoulder, his breathing deepening. Instinctively, she began to sway in place, the way she used to when Jason was small and scared of thunderstorms. One of the tiny hands reached for a strand of her brown hair and curled around it. The prince chooses well, the Emperor murmured, something like pride softening his expression. His instincts are strong. He inclined his head, a gesture of unusual respect toward a human. Welcome to the Imperial household, Sarah Morgan. Your life will not be the same. As she held the alien prince, a wave of unexpected tenderness rose in her chest. Whatever this was, however temporary, something inside her clicked into place. She kept her brother alive through grief and hunger and endless work. Holding this fragile, strange child, that same protective instinct flared hot and fierce. She had no idea how profoundly that instinct would reshape the future of 2 civilizations. The prince's private suite felt less like a nursery and more like someone had grown a room from living crystal. The young heir requires absolute silence during rest cycles, said Tia, the chief royal caretaker, her 4 eyes blinking in a slow, disapproving pattern. His neural lattice is extremely sensitive to auditory disruption. Sarah sat in a specially grown chair beside the prince's sleeping pod, the child curled against her chest. The chair molded itself around her body, supporting her back and arms as if it knew exactly where she was tired. "I understand," Sarah whispered. Tia's eyes narrowed. "And yet you continue to produce sound waves." Sorry," Sarah mouthed, forcing herself to hum only inside her head. Once Tia finally left, the room felt quieter and somehow larger. The walls shifted through slow gradients of color, driven by the prince's biorhythms. The furniture had no hard edges, everything flowing together in organic curves. The floor beneath Sarah's boots pulsed gently with each beat of her heart. The prince's weight grew heavier as time passed, a dull ache forming in her arms and shoulders. But every time she even thought about shifting, his fingers tightened unconsciously in her hair, and she stayed perfectly still. 3 days ago, she'd been mopping corridors and dodging supervisors. Now she was sitting in a living armchair, cradling the heir to an empire whose fleet had once blotted out Earth's sky. The door whispered open. "Remain seated," the newcomer said softly, another Theassian voice, containing multiple tones woven together. Sarah glanced up and froze. Emperor Zorandes himself stepped into the nursery, alone. No guards, no advisors. Every protocol briefing she'd ever overheard said he was never supposed to be by himself. He stopped beside her chair, his gaze going first to his son. "He sleeps," he observed. The usual resonance of his voice was tempered to a near whisper. "The physicians are confounded. We have analyzed your biochemistry, your genome, your hormonal output. Nothing appears exceptional. I'm not sure I can explain it either, Your Majesty," Sarah replied, keeping her own voice low. "Back home, I helped raise my younger brother after our parents died. Maybe I just got used to calming scared kids." He studied her more closely. "Human familial bonds are intense. Our anthropologists note that you form deep attachments despite your brief lifespans." "I guess we know how little time we have," Sarah said softly, eyes on the sleeping prince. "So we make it count." For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft sound of the child's breathing. "You should be aware," Zorandes said at last, "that my son is not a typical heir. His sensitivities exceed all recorded norms. It is both his greatest strength and a vulnerability." Sarah glanced at the small, peaceful face resting against her shoulder. "He looks calm now. That calm exists only in your presence." The Emperor's tone darkened. His mother, the Empress, passed into the void at his birth. "Among my people, it is rare for a male to take a direct role in child-rearing. But Zorian and I share a bond one do not entirely understand." Sarah's throat tightened with sympathy. Emperor or not, he was also a widower standing over his sleeping child. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said gently. "On Earth, we say grief is just love with nowhere to go." His head tilted slightly, as if committing the phrase to memory. "Your emotional lexicon is dense." He straightened. "We depart this station in 2 standard days for the Imperial homeworld." Sarah blinked. "Of course, Your Majesty. I wish you a safe journey. I'm glad I could help while you were." "You misunderstand, Sarah Morgan," he interrupted. "You will accompany us." The prince shifted slightly in her arms, fingers tightening on her uniform as if answering the statement. My contract is with Epsilon Station," Sarah stammered. "My wages go directly to my brother. He depends on that. Your employment contract has been annulled and subsumed into the Imperial household," Zorandes said calmly. "Your brother will receive a stipend 5 times your current remittance, transferred directly. Your own compensation will be adjusted to reflect your new station." Of course, the Emperor didn't negotiate. He rearranged reality. Sarah swallowed hard, leaving the station, traveling on the Imperial flagship, going to the alien homeworld, somewhere no human had ever been invited. "When do we leave, Your Majesty?" she asked quietly. "In approximately 26 hours. His gaze softened as he looked at his son, now completely at peace. "Understand this, Sarah Morgan. This is not a punishment. In my culture, what you have given my son is priceless." He turned to leave, his robe trailing like liquid starlight. "Your Majesty?" Sarah called softly. He paused at the threshold. "Why me?" she asked. "If your scientist can isolate whatever it is about me that soothes him, You wouldn't need to uproot my entire life. You wouldn't need me at all. The Emperor's 4 eyes narrowed in thought. Biology is only part of the equation. My son does not merely sleep in your presence. He held her gaze. He dreams. Before she could respond, he stepped out, and the door sealed shut, leaving Sarah in the quiet nursery with a sleeping alien child and a future she could never have imagined. The Imperial vessel Eternal Radiance didn't look like a starship from Sarah's science fiction movies. It looked like a floating palace carved from living crystal. When they escorted her aboard, Sarah felt like she was stepping into the inside of gemstone. Corridors curved in gentle arcs, walls shimmering with soft internal light. The gravity felt perfectly tuned, the air warmer and richer than the station's recycled mix. Your quarters, Vela said, pausing before a seamless segment of wall. Vela was a Theassian attendant assigned to manage all things relating to Sarah. Even as a servant by Imperial standards, Vela moved with that effortless grace all Theassians seemed to have, as if gravity and clumsiness were problems other beings suffered from. The wall parted like a fluid membrane, revealing a suite big enough to make Sarah's childhood apartment complex look like storage lockers. She took one step inside and forgot how to breathe. The room was all soothing curves and warm tones. The walls shifted gently from moss green to amber, adjusting to her presence. The bed was a floating platform that dipped slightly as she approached, inviting her like a living thing. A section of the wall flickered to life, showing a simulated view of a peaceful forest with dappled sunlight. This is for me? Sarah asked, dazed. These are standard guest accommodations, Vela said, sounding faintly puzzled by her awe. They have been recalibrated for human comfort. Atmospheric content, temperature, pressure, and visual interior preferences. If these are standard, Sarah muttered, I don't want to see what counts as luxury. She walked slowly to what looked like a dresser. When she touched the surface, it responded with a soft hum and slid open. Inside, she found familiar objects. Her worn photos, the little wooden box with her mother's wedding ring, 3 actual paper books she'd insisted on bringing into space, even though people had laughed at her. Beside them lay new clothing. Tunics and pants in soft fabrics that seemed to ripple between shades of blue and gray as she moved them. Your station belongings were transferred, Vela explained. In addition, the ward master has provided attire suitable for your new role as the prince's sleep attendant. When do I actually start? Sarah asked. I mean, beyond what I did on the station. The prince's rest cycle begins in 4 hours, Vela answered. Someone will come for you. She hesitated, then added in a quieter tone. You should be aware, human Morgan, that your appointment is controversial. Controversial, Sarah repeated. That sounds reassuring. It is unprecedented for a human to be admitted to the Imperial Inner Circle, Vela said carefully. Some consider it beneath the dignity of the throne that a non-Thalassian tends to the heir of the Theassian Empire. I didn't exactly apply for the job, Sarah pointed out. Your emperor sort of drafted me, which is why your position is unassailable while he favors it, Vela replied. Still, I suggest caution. Not all share Emperor Zorandis' progressive interpretation of human value. When Vela left, the room suddenly felt huge and quiet. Sarah sat on the edge of the floating bed. It adjusted beneath her automatically, aligning to support her spine. For a moment, she just stared at the fake skyline on the wall and listened to her own heartbeat. Her wrist calm-shined. Jason's face popped up, slightly grainy from long-range compression. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, a med student's mess in the background. Where are you? He demanded. And why did a bank just tell me I've been gifted 5,000 credits? Did you rob an alien casino? Sarah laughed despite herself. Relax. No crimes. Just a promotion. She turned her device to show more of the room. Jason's eyes grew comically wide. Sarah, that does not look like your crummy station bunk. Because it isn't. She told him the story, sanitized just enough to avoid breaching any obvious Imperial security rules. The prince's insomnia. The Emperor handing her his son. The command that she would travel with them to the home world as an official sleep attendant. So, Jason summed up, brushing a hand through his hair. You're basically the royal babysitter for the future ruler of the species that conquered us. Sleep attendant, she corrected. There's a difference. I think. He leaned closer to the screen. Do you realize what this could mean? You're going to see their homeworld, their tech, their medical systems. You'll have access to information no human has ever had. I'm not a spy, Jace, she said firmly. I'm there to keep a little kid from breaking apart under his own nervous system. I'm not asking you to steal blueprints, he said quickly. Just pay attention. Learn what you can. Anything you observe could help humanity later. Imagine what their neurotech could do for us. For our hospitals. Our patients. His voice softened. You've always looked out for me. Maybe now you get to look out for all of us, too. After they ended the call, Sarah lay back on her bed, staring up at the ceiling. It shifted to display a perfect blue sky with clouds drifting lazily by, tuned to Earth normal visual comfort profile. Progress for humans, she thought. A seat inside the alien empire. The ability to influence something. Or maybe she had just been drafted as a living comfort object for an alien prince. She didn't have long to think about it. A soft chime sounded. Part of the wall dimmed, and a Theassian face appeared. Sleep attendant Morgan, the female, said formally. You are requested in the prince's chambers immediately. There has been a change in schedule. Sarah changed into one of the new soft blue tunics, pulled on the matching pants, and followed the glowing directional path that appeared under her feet. Security tightened as she went deeper into the ship, each checkpoint scanning her thoroughly. Every guard seemed to stare at her just a second too long. When she stepped through the final door, chaos hit her like a wave. Several medical specialists clustered around a sleeping pod that glowed with frantic data. The small prince thrashed inside, keening in that piercing high register, his luminous skin gone disturbingly pale. Streams of alien script scrolled midair. Emperor Zerandes stood nearby, his face set in a controlled calm that couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. Approach, he said as soon as he saw her. The second Zorian's 4 eyes spotted Sarah. He reached toward her with desperate, clawing motions, his cries intensifying. She didn't wait for permission this time. She went straight to the pod, and the medical team parted just enough for her to reach him. It's okay, she murmured as she lifted him out. His body trembled in her hands. The change was almost instant. The agonized keening broke off in a choked sobs, then tapered into tiny hiccups as he curled in her chest, clutching at her tunic. His breathing steadied, the frantic numbers on the hovering monitors dropping into calm rhythms. Neurological activity stabilizing, one physician whispered. Stress markers falling rapidly. The separation interval was too long, the Emperor said quietly. We must adjust protocols. He looked at Sarah. His gaze lingered on the way Zorian's fingers tangled in her hair, the relaxed line of the child's shoulders. It appears my son's attachment is more comprehensive than we estimated, Zerandes said. From now on, you will remain within his proximity during rest cycles and waking hours. The scope of your responsibilities is expanded. Sarah's arms already ached, but she only nodded. I understand, Your Majesty. After the medical team cleared out and the Emperor left to attend to other matters, only one other attendant remained. A younger Theassian named Mira, assigned as nursery support. You exhibit remarkable caregiving instincts, Mira observed as Sarah settled into a chair formed from the wall. Most humans we encounter display emotional volatility incompatible with such focused nurturing. I've had practice, Sarah said, shifting the prince slightly, careful not to disturb him. My brother was barely out of diapers when our parents died. There wasn't anyone else to look after him. Mira tilted her head, all 4 eyes intent. Your guardians expired, and yet you chose to devote resources to your sibling without material gain? That's what family does, Sarah said simply. We take care of each other. Humans, Mira murmured, half to herself. Your species confuses our behavioral models. Zorian stirred, his small hand tightening around the fabric near Sarah's collarbone. She looked down at him and felt a fierce, steady warmth spread through her chest. Whatever else happened, whatever the Empire intended, one thing felt solid and real. This child trusted her. And somewhere in that trust, a new future was quietly taking shape. The homeworld was nothing like the cold empire Sarah had imagined. From the viewport of eternal radiance, she held Zorian on her hip and watched the world grow larger, his little fingers splayed against the transparent surface. "Zorian home," he said in his musical, high-pitched English, practiced over weeks of repetition. At roughly the developmental equivalent of a human 4-year-old, his language skills were astonishing. "Yes, Your Highness," she replied softly. Almost home. The planet below them gleamed with shimmering oceans and luminous landmasses. Cities rose from the ground like organic sculptures, towers twisting upward in spirals, connected by delicate-looking arches. Vast forests of silver-blue vegetation stretched between them. As the ship descended through a layer of iridescent clouds, the capital city came into view, a sprawling network of crystalline structures centered on one breathtaking palace that seemed half-grown, half-carved into perfection. "Thea Prime," Sarah whispered, realizing with a jolt that she was the first human ever to see it in person. Emperor Zorandes joined them at the viewport. "You are uneasy," he noted quietly. "A little," she admitted. "On my world, we used to tell stories about aliens invading Earth. We never imagined we'd end up living in their palaces instead. No human has walked our soil before you," the Emperor said. "Your presence will generate discussion." "That's one word for it," Sarah muttered. When they disembarked, the gravity felt slightly lighter than Epsilon's, giving her steps a faint spring. The air was sweeter, threaded with a spice she couldn't name. A reception party waited on the landing platform. High-ranking nobles and officials in elaborate robes, their jeweled insignia catching the twin suns above. Every gaze locked on Sarah and the prince in her arms. An older male with pale lilac skin stepped forward, his robes heavy with symbols of authority. "Emperor Zorandes," he intoned, "the council welcomes your return. The ruling assembly awaits your presence." His eyes slid to Sarah, and his upper lip tightened almost imperceptibly. Perhaps the human should first be quarantined and exhaustively assessed before allowing it inside the inner residence. "Chancellor Vorix," Zorandes replied coolly. "Sleep attendant Morgan has undergone comprehensive medical scanning aboard the flagship. She presents no biological hazard. More importantly, my son's attachment to her is not negotiable." He shifted his tone just enough for the entire assembled court to understand the weight behind his next words. "She goes where he goes." Vorix bowed, deferential on the surface, displeasure radiating in the deepening of his skin tone. "As you command, Emperor." Sarah followed the procession through corridors that felt alive. The palace responded to the Emperor's presence, walls blooming open, pathways forming. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along the floors like veins carrying light. The stairs never stopped. Some Theassians tried to pretend she wasn't there. Others watched with open hostility. A few eyes held curiosity, but not warmth. Even the palace itself seemed to pause for a fraction of a second as she walked past, as if deciding whether to accept her. Zorian sensed it. He pressed his forehead against her cheek and whispered, "Sarah's safe with Zorian." His fierce little certainty steadied her more than any security protocol. Her new rooms were directly adjacent to the prince's suite, connected by a living door that hummed as it learned her biological signature. The space was luxurious, but these chambers were different from the guest room on the ship. The furniture had clearly been customized, scaled for human height and proportions. Temperature, humidity, and lighting were all tuned to what the system now recognized as Seracomfort parameters. "You will reside here permanently," Valus said. "The connecting door will admit only you and the prince without authorization. No other human has been assigned quarters within the inner palace before." Sarah ran her hand along the wall. It warmed under her touch. That's a lot to take in. Over the next days, life found a new rhythm. Sarah handled Zorian's rest cycles and daily routines, sharing duties with Mira and the specialized tutors who managed his intensive education. The prince refused to sleep without Sarah nearby, but he was slowly learning to tolerate short intervals with others during waking hours. One evening, she received a summons to the Emperor's private study. The room felt different from the rest of the palace. The walls were made of living wood that curved around shells of artifacts. There were relics from dozens of worlds, intricate sculptures, devices, preserved flora. One object caught her eye, an old Earth globe, its paint slightly faded. "You recognize it," Zorandi said as she entered. "It's an old-style map of my planet," Sarah said softly. "From before you arrived." "Before we arrived?" he corrected. "History belongs to both conqueror and conquered." He gestured to a human-sized chair. It adjusted automatically as she sat. "You have been in my household long enough," he began without preamble, "that there are truths you must understand. Few even among my own kind know all of what I am about to tell you. Fewer still among human worlds would ever be permitted such knowledge." Sarah sat a little straighter. "I'm listening." "Theassians are not a single species in the way humans think," he said. "We are a triad of genetically related subspecies that evolved on different regions of our homeworld. My form, the one most common in your encounters, is the dominant variant." She frowned. "So there are other types of Theassians I've never seen?" "There are almost none left at one point," he replied. "Our unification wars nearly wiped them out. Eventually, we recognized their unique traits and placed them under protection." He paused, the lines around his eyes tightening. "My mate, Zorian's mother, belonged to the coastal lineage. Her people possess heightened empathic resonance, an adaptation to dense communal living. They feel the emotions of those around them with exceptional clarity. Understanding dawned. Zorian inherited that, amplified, beyond any documented measure," Zorandi's confirmed. "He experiences other minds as if they were storms crashing through his own. In a palace filled with ambition, fear, jealousy, and constant maneuvering, his awareness was a constant onslaught. Sleep became nearly impossible. Except when I'm around," she said quietly. The Emperor studied her. "Humans are strange to our sensors. Where our emotions overlay in layered harmonics, yours tend to focus in singular bands. Most humans produce chaotic emotional output: fear, hope, frustration, desire. It is loud but simple." He leaned forward slightly. "You, Sarah Morgan, generate something else. A continuous, focused emotional field that our translators fail to categorize. The closest equivalents we have are protective guardianship, selfless nurturing, commitment without condition." She almost laughed from the shock of it. "You're describing love, Your Majesty. That's the human word. Not romantic, not transactional. Just love." "Love," he repeated, testing the shape of it. "Our anthropologists mark that word as imprecise and overused." "Maybe," she said. "But what you're describing, that's the version we save for children, family, people we'd protect even at cost to ourselves." He considered her for a long moment. "Whatever the correct term, your emotional signature forms a shelter around my son. Within that shelter, the cacophony quiets, and his mind can rest. It is not something our science can easily replicate." He straightened. "You must also understand the political terrain. Zorian is the first heir in 7 generations to carry coastal lineage. There are factions that view his sensitivity as a flaw, a danger. They will not harm him physically. Our laws are absolute in that regard, but there are countless ways to undermine a future ruler." "And my presence?" she asked. "Where do I fit in all this?" "As long as he depends on you. No one can fully remove what you represent," Zorandi said. "Your existence beside him is a constant reminder that the Empire has more paths than conquest alone." "I'm just a janitor who got promoted into being a live anxiety blanket," Sarah said quietly. "I don't know how to navigate an alien court." "That will change," the Emperor replied. "Beginning tomorrow, you will receive daily instruction in language, etiquette, and political structure. If you are to walk these halls, you must recognize the traps beneath their beauty." She nodded slowly. "And if I make a mistake?" "You will," he said matter-of-factly. "The measure of any being is not whether they err, but whether they learn and continue forward. You have done both since the moment you entered my sight." As she left the study that night, Sarah understood something she had never dared to claim. She wasn't just holding the prince. She was becoming something dangerous and precious and deeply inconvenient to those who wanted humanity to remain small forever. 6 months later, she could hold full conversations in High Theassian, including most of the formal honorifics. Her language instructor, Carrie, still winced whenever Sarah butchered the third harmonic tones. Your vocal apparatus lacks a dedicated second resonance chamber, Carrie said, not unkindly. Yet your progress is impressive for a human. High praise, Sarah smiled. Does that go on my report to the Chancellor? It already has, Carrie said, lowering her voice. Chancellor Vorix receives weekly updates on your studies, your movements, your influence on the prince. You have become an object of considerable scrutiny. Tell him I'm still figuring out which fork to use at official dinners, Sarah joked lightly. But inside, she filed away the warning. Vorix never attacked head-on when he could hit from the side. The next day, she discovered how far the Emperor intended her influence to reach. She was summoned to the Great Council Chamber. The room echoed with layered voices, an amphitheater of power. Representatives from dozens of systems and noble houses sat in tiered rows, their attire glittering under the crystalline dome. Sarah's seat was a small, discreetly placed chair slightly behind the Emperor's dais. Politely significant, obviously separate, Chancellor Vorix stood in the center of the floor, his voice amplified by the chamber's design. As I was outlining, Your Majesty, he said, our governors on Earth report troubling patterns. Human learning institutions are expanding beyond the approved technical curriculum. There are indications of unauthorized information networks forming between settlements. Sarah's stomach clenched. Jason hadn't mentioned anything like that, but that didn't mean it wasn't happening. Do these developments present an immediate security threat? Asked a counselor seated 2 tiers up. Not yet, Vorix said, letting the word hang. But historical analysis across 3 prior annexed worlds shows that manipulation of educational systems is a precursor to organized resistance. I recommend preemptive measures, tighter control on permitted content, enhanced surveillance of communications, and reallocation of potential agitators to off-world work assignments. A surgical decapitation of human leadership, dressed up as prudent risk management. The economic impact on our resource output, another counselor queried. Negligible, Vorix answered smoothly. If anything, we may see increased compliance and productivity after corrective measures are observed. Chancellor, the Emperor said, you speak of humans as though they are theoretical variables. Yet we have in this chamber a representative of that species. Everything went very still. Sleep Attendant Morgan, Zorandes said, turning his head slightly towards Sarah. You have lived among your people. You now live among us. What is your assessment? Hundreds of alien eyes shifted to her. Sarah stood slowly, pulse pounding. Her language training had covered how to address the ruling council. It had not covered how to contradict the most powerful bureaucrat in the Empire in his own arena. Your Imperial Majesty, honored counselors, she began in carefully modulated High Theassian. I cannot speak to specific clandestine activities on Earth. My information is limited to personal communications. She took a breath. But I understand human psychology. Restricting our education, especially when it comes to our children, does not lead to obedience. It leads to rebellion. A ripple of subtle discomfort moved through the chamber. If I may offer another interpretation, she continued, keeping her posture respectful but her spine straight. Expanded human education may not signal preparation for revolt. It may simply be adaptation. Humans know we are at the bottom of the imperial hierarchy. We're trying to become more useful, more indispensable. We invest in knowledge because, for us, it is the only currency that might change our position. Vorix's skin darkened. The human suggests that we reward possible insurrection with greater opportunities. I suggest that humans who see a path to a better life within the Empire are less likely to risk everything trying to fight it, Sarah replied steadily. If you fear unrest, you might consider giving humans controlled ways to advance through merit instead of punishing them for wanting to learn. She turned briefly toward the Emperor. My own role is a direct result of Your Majesty recognizing ability over species. The prince's well-being improved. The Empire benefited. The murmur this time felt more thoughtful, less hostile. Perhaps, she said carefully, instead of closing doors, you could open specific ones. Expand approved subjects that clearly benefit Imperial interests. Identify promising human students and bring them into supervised programs. Give them a stake in maintaining the system that gave them their chance. Zorandes watched her with that unreadable, star-deep gaze. An intriguing perspective, he said after a long pause. The Council will weigh your testimony alongside the Chancellor's. The debate continued. Details were discussed. Numbers were cited. But when the session finally adjourned, the Emperor motioned for her to follow him through a private exit. You were bold, he said once they were alone in the small antechamber. Possibly foolish. I apologize if I crossed lines, Sarah said. But I couldn't stand there and listen to my entire species be treated like a math problem with a cleaner answer. He gave a low sound that might have been amusement. No apology is needed. I summoned you precisely because I knew you would not mince your words. She blinked. You wanted the Council to hear that from a human? Vorix views subject populations as quantities, not people, the Emperor said. That mindset can be strategically useful, but it has limits. Your presence in that chamber disrupted the pattern. He turned toward the window, watching traffic streams arc through the sky. In truth, I have been considering a different management model for human worlds, integration rather than perpetual subjugation. Integration, she repeated, hardly daring to breathe. Gradual, he clarified. Expanded education. Limited self-governance. Positions within the bureaucracy for those who prove competent. In time, advisory representation. He looked at her again. From this day, you will serve not only as my son's sleep attendant, but as special cultural advisor on human affairs. Your insights will inform these policies. Sarah's mind scrambled to process it. Chancellor Vorix is going to despise that. As he despised bringing you here at all, Zorandes said. And yet here you stand, shaping the future of your people. She walked out of that room with her heart hammering and her legs feeling strangely weightless. She had come to this palace as a glorified comfort object for a scared child. Now, the Emperor had tied her to something far larger. 2 years later, the gardens of the Imperial Palace were Sarah's favorite place on the homeworld. The memory pond glowed softly as Prince Zorian moved his hand over its surface. The liquid responded, blooming into ripples of color that shifted with his thoughts. The sky above them was pearl white with faint bands of color where the suns hit the higher atmosphere. "Push me higher, Sarah," he had yelled earlier, laughing from the specially built swing that hung from an arching crystalline tree. "Higher. If I push any harder, we'll need clearance from flight control," she teased. Now, calmer, they sat by the pond. Zorian had grown into a lanky, silver-blue adolescent, still lighter than a human boy his apparent age, but almost as tall as Sarah. His empathic aura had matured. It didn't slam into her the way it had when he was younger, but it was always there, like a faint hum at the edge of her awareness. "Father says I begin formal court appearances next cycle," he said, watching the colors swirl. "That's part of growing into your role," Sarah replied. "You can't stay hidden in the gardens forever, Your Highness." He shot her an exasperated look. "You promised you'd call me Zorian when we're alone." "Zorian, then," she corrected with a small smile. He traced a pattern in the glowing water. "What if I fail? What if I lose control in front of everyone? In council chambers, emotions fill the air like storms. I can barely breathe sometimes even when I'm not inside." Sarah rested her forearm on her knees. "Your shields are much stronger now. Master Telk says you're ahead of where any of his students have ever been. Because of you," Zorian said simply. "When you're near, everything gets quieter. My mind finds balance." "That's the goal," she said softly. "But you're learning to make that balance yourself, too. You already spent some hours in court meetings without me." "Not enough," he muttered. "Enough to know you can," she countered. "And that matters." He looked at her then, all four eyes painfully earnest. "What happens when I don't need you anymore?" The question landed like a physical blow. She'd thought it 100 times, but hearing it in his voice hurt in a way she hadn't prepared for. "I don't think that day is any time soon," she said carefully. "And even if you manage your empathy entirely on your own, that doesn't mean we stop being us. Bonds don't vanish just because the original need changes." He considered that. The pool shifted to calmer shades, pale gold and blue. "I want to be a different kind of emperor," Zorian said at last. "Not one who stands above everyone, separate and untouchable. I want to stay connected to the people I trust." "Then you'll probably break a lot of rules," Sarah said with a sigh, "and make a lot of enemies. But you might also make history." He smiled crookedly. "You always tell me what I need to hear, not what I want." "That's what family does," she said, then hesitated, realizing what she'd just implied. His face softened. "You are my family, Sarah. Maybe not in the official records, but in here." He tapped his chest. Before she could answer, the pond's glow dimmed slightly, shadows layering over the surface. "You are remarkably skilled at influencing the air." The voice came from behind them. Chancellor Vorix stood just beyond the garden path, ceremonial robes sweeping the ground. Time had paled his skin slightly, but his posture remained rigid, his eyes sharp. "Chancellor," Sarah said, standing automatically, "we were just enjoying a moment of calm before more significant storms." Vorix said smoothly, "Your Highness, the Emperor requests your presence in the receiving hall. The delegation from Andari Prime has arrived." Zorian rose, tension coiling through his aura. "Will Sarah come?" he asked, voice smaller for just a second. "After your initial greetings," Vorix replied, "as your father specified. You are the prince. You will stand beside him alone first." Sarah touched Zorian's elbow lightly. "We've practiced this. You'll do fine. I'll join you soon." He squared his shoulders. "Very well. I am ready." As he left with the Chancellor, Sarah remained by the memory pond. Its surface mirrored her own roiling thoughts. Flickers of earth, palace corridors, a boy who was not a boy anymore. "You have accomplished much," Vorix said when he returned alone minutes later, stepping closer. "Once, the prince could not endure a council chamber without unraveling. Now he speaks there, even when you are absent." "I'm proud of him," Sarah replied. "He's worked hard." "You've given him strength," Vorix said, "and introduced weaknesses." Sarah's jaw tightened. "You think caring makes him weak?" "I think dependency makes any ruler vulnerable," Vorix corrected. "And Zorian's dependency on you has granted you an unusual degree of leverage for a human." "You talk like I'm manipulating him," Sarah said quietly. "All I've ever tried to do is help him breathe in a world that overloads his senses." Vorix studied her. "That may be true now, but power has a way of corrupting even the best intentions. You should be aware, sleep attendant Morgan. The noble families tolerate your presence because the prince insists on it and the emperor shields you. When either of those conditions changes, your position will be reevaluated." "By you?" she asked. "By those who remember what the empire was before you arrived," he said. "Before the idea took root that humans might be more than tools." He turned toward the palace. "Enjoy the gardens, human Morgan, while you still can." After he left, Sarah remained alone by the pond. In its shifting depths, she saw glimpses of paths. Her returning to Earth, anonymous again. Her removed quietly in the name of security. Zorian standing alone on a dais, his empathic aura jagged with grief. She took a long breath. It didn't matter how precarious her status was. What mattered was using it for as long as she had it. If they wanted to wait until Zorian outgrew his need for her before moving against her, then she'd just make sure that by the time that happened, the Empire itself had changed enough that they couldn't push humans back into their old box. 10 standard years after she first walked into the council chamber, it looked very different. The tiers were crowded, but not just with Theassians. Delegates from integrated worlds, slender beings from water planets, sturdy miners from high-gravity moons, filled new seating sections. Holographic displays hovered with live feeds from distant systems. And at the center of it all stood Prince Zorian. He was no longer the child who had wept himself hoarse in a crystal crib. He was a young Theassian in his mid-teens, close to his father's height, coastal luminescence glowing faintly beneath his skin. His presence had changed. He held himself with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly how much power he would one day wield, and exactly how much responsibility came with it. Sarah stood at the edge of the central floor, in her official position now as special advisor to the Crown Prince on human and integrated affairs. Her clothing merged human tailoring with Theassian fabrics, a visual symbol of her in-between status. Representatives of the Empire, Zorian began, his voice clear, harmonics perfectly tuned. Our ancestors built a legacy that has endured for 12,000 years. The Theassian banner has crossed the stars, bringing order, structure, and progress. So far, the speech followed tradition. Conservative counselors leaned back, visibly relieved. But any structure endures not because it never changes, Zorian continued, but because it adapts when reality demands it. This was where tradition ended. We live in a time of shifting currents. New powers rise at our borders. Technology evolves faster than any previous era. To remain strong, the Empire must draw on the full potential of all who live under its rule, not only those who were born Theassian. The chamber buzzed with low voices. Sarah's heart thudded. I propose the formal creation of the Imperial Integration Council, Zorian said, charged with identifying, training, and elevating talented individuals from subject species into roles that serve the Empire's interests. Beginning with humans, whose adaptability and innovation are assets we have underused. Conservative faces darkened. Progressive allies leaned forward. This council will not dilute Theassian leadership, Zorian said firmly. It will strengthen it. We remain at the apex, but we stop leaving valuable minds at the base unused. Chancellor Vorix rose, his robes whispering. Your Highness, he said, every word dripping respect and alarm. Our empire stands because the galaxy recognizes the clarity of our authority. To blur the line between ruler and ruled is to invite confusion, perhaps even revolt. With respect, Chancellor, Zorian replied calmly. Revolt comes when you give people nothing to lose. History shows our greatest collapses began when we ignored the needs and potential of those beneath us. He gestured lightly, and a series of historical examples appeared in shimmering light. Old rebellions, economic collapses, near overthrows. Incorporating the strengths of others makes us stronger, not weaker, Zorian said. Our own history proves it. The tiered integration reforms after the unification wars turned former enemies into loyal contributors. I simply propose extending this proven strategy to a wider range of species. Vorix narrowed his eyes. And you begin with humans. A people whose population has grown rapidly under our rule, whose education and communication patterns already show concerning deviations. Humans are among the Empire's most creative problem solvers, Zorian said. I know this not only from reports, but from personal experience. His gaze flicked once, briefly, to Sarah. When I was a child, my mind was nearly broken by my own sensitivity, he said. It was a human, a maintenance worker from a conquered planet, who gave me peace. From that point, every tutor, every physician, every strategist became effective. Without her, you would not see me standing before you like this today. The statement landed like a shockwave. I do not propose integration because of sentiment, Zorian continued. I propose it because it works. Emperor Zorandes, seated at the dais, finally rose. Age had begun to dim his glow, but his presence still filled the chamber. My son speaks with both heart and logic, he said. The survival of an empire requires both. He looked over the assembly. I support the creation of the Imperial Integration Council, as outlined. Let the records show this initiative proceeds with my full authority. There was debate, resistance, demands for limits and safeguards. But the fundamental decision had been made. The council would exist. Pathways would open. Afterward, as the chamber emptied, Zorian found Sarah near one of the side exits. Well, he asked, a hint of the boy he'd once been peeking through. Did I sound like a complete starblind idealist? You sounded like an emperor, she said honestly. With a plan. He exhaled, some tension draining. I could feel the Chancellor's disapproval like static. It's growing. You're threatening his idea of what the Empire is supposed to look like, she said. But you knew this road would be steep. They walked together through a private corridor, flanked discreetly by guards. Father is not eternal, Zorian said quietly. My empathic sense tells me what the official medical reports don't. His timeline is measured in years, not decades. Sarah's chest tightened. Are you sure? I can feel the way his energy frays at the edges, Zorian said. He is spending what remains of his strength, pushing reforms he believes must exist before he's gone. She nodded slowly. Then we use this time well. I intend to, he said, which is why I have a proposal of my own. For you. I already have 2 jobs, she said lightly. Sleep attendant and walking headache for conservative politicians. Exactly, he said. It's time to retire the first title and formalize the second. He stopped in the middle of the corridor, facing her fully. The role of sleep attendant was created for a child who couldn't cope, he said. I'm not that child anymore. I can manage most environments without your constant presence. The words hurt, even as she knew they were true. I don't want to cast you aside, Zorian added quickly, feeling the flicker of pain she tried to hide. Quite the opposite. I want to expand your reach, not shrink it. She raised an eyebrow. Go on. I've petitioned Father to dissolve the sleep attendant post and appoint you instead as Imperial Ambassador for Human Affairs, he said. Full diplomatic status. A permanent seat on the Integration Council. Official power to speak for your people and shape policy across the Empire. For a second, she forgot how to speak. An ambassador, she repeated. Someone has to bridge the gap, he said. Someone who understands humans and Theassians. Someone the Emperor trusts. Someone the future Emperor trusts even more. Vorix will go ballistic, she said faintly. He will, Zorian agreed. But he also knows how many attempts he's made to neutralize your influence behind the scenes, and how many times Father and I refused. Making your role official will make it harder for him to sideline you quietly later. They started walking again. When Father is gone, Zorian said, the conservatives will try to drag the Empire backward. I'll need allies who believe in integration and have the experience to navigate the old families. You've already spent years building relationships. I need you in the open, not tucked away in my childhood nursery. It won't be safe, she said. It was never safe, he replied gently. The difference is now we stop pretending your work is anything but central. Sarah thought of Jason back on Earth, of the human kids studying in makeshift schools, of young workers who still wore shock collars on some distant mining moons. She thought of Zorian as a tiny child gripping her hair to fall asleep. Then we do it, she said. We make it official. In the years that followed, the universe pushed back with everything it had. There were quiet assassination attempts, political sabotage, propaganda aimed at painting Zorian as weak and Sarah as a corrupting influence. But stone by stone, policy by policy, the foundations of a different empire were laid. 10 more standard years passed. The plaza below the Imperial Palace seethed with life. For the first time in Theassian history, humans stood openly in the heart of the Empire's capital, not as servants in hidden tunnels, but as honored guests in a public ceremony. They wore everything from simple earth clothes to hybrid garments that mixed human cuts with Theassian fabrics. Holographic banners shimmered overhead, displaying the symbol of the Theassian Empire intertwined with a new emblem. A stylized star cradle surrounding multiple planets, representing integrated species standing together. On the ceremonial balcony above, Emperor Zorian raised his hands. He no longer wore the title of prince. Emperor Zorandes had passed 5 years earlier, his last official act to sign Sarah's appointment as Imperial Ambassador, cementing her status beyond the reach of his opponents. Zorian had grown into his power. His coastal lineage gave him empathic finesse that made him terrifying in negotiations and unshakable in crisis. He could feel intent shift like wind long before plots fully formed. Attempts to topple him fizzled out, smothered before anyone understood how close they'd come. Beside him stood Ambassador Sarah Morgan. Her brown hair was streaked with silver now, fine lines etched at the corners of her eyes. But her posture was straight, her gaze steady. The palace considered her part of its permanent architecture by now. She wore formal ambassadorial attire, a dark blue coat with silver accents reminiscent of Theassian imperial colors, cut in a human style, layered over a long tunic woven from living fiber. The crest of her office, an earth globe encircled by the Empire's sigil, was pinned over her heart. "Hard to believe," she murmured under her breath, "that I used to worry about getting mop water on my boots." Zorian's mouth curved in a faint smile. "You still worry. Now it's just about galactic policy instead of floor polish." Below them, the crowd's buzz swelled as the final preparations completed. Today they would sign the Imperial Integration Treaty. For humans, it meant the end of their official status as subject labor class and their recognition as full Imperial citizens. For other integrated peoples, it set a precedent that would ripple outward, changing the power balance across dozens of worlds. "You know they'll study this day in both human and Theassian history classes," Zorian said quietly. "They'll argue about exactly when the turning point was. When did our relationship with Earth change from conquest to partnership?" Sarah looked out at the sea of faces. She saw human children sitting on Theassian shoulders, mixed crews from outlying colonies. Even Jason, older now, standing with a delegation from Earth's newly recognized medical council. "For me," she said, "the turning point was a sleepless little boy who wouldn't let go of my shirt." "You call that the turning point," Zorian said, "but I think it started even earlier. It started with a janitor who refused to treat herself as invisible, who kept singing Earth lullabies under her breath in an alien corridor." He drew a breath, then stepped up to the ceremonial podium. "Citizens of the Empire," he began, his voice carrying across the plaza and through countless remote feeds. 12,000 years ago, my ancestors began a journey that shaped the stars. They believed strength came from domination, from standing above others." He glanced at Sarah for half a heartbeat. "Today we begin a new chapter," he continued, "one in which strength comes from shared purpose, from recognizing the value in every mind, every world, every species that chooses to stand with us." Images appeared in the sky. Earth's blue sphere, then other planets, then old battles, then scenes of cooperation. Humans working alongside Theassians in labs, on ships, in classrooms. "For too long, humans have served the Empire without a voice in guiding it," Zorian said. "But their creativity, resilience, and capacity for what they call love have proven themselves again and again." The word hung there openly now, spoken by an emperor in front of the galaxy. "Therefore, by the authority vested in me as sovereign of the Theassian Empire, I sign the Imperial Integration Treaty," he declared. "From this day forward, humans are recognized as full citizens, with the rights and responsibilities that status entails." He turned to Sarah and held out a ceremonial stylus, made of crystal and metal fused together. "Ambassador Sarah Morgan," he said, voice softening just slightly, "will you sign on behalf of your people?" She stepped forward. The stylus was cool in her hand. "On behalf of the humans of Earth and all human-inhabited worlds," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest, "I sign." When the stylus touched the glowing panel, her name appeared in both human script and Theassian symbols. The crowd exploded into sound. Cheers, layered harmonics, the rising roar of something broken finally being repaired. Human voices rose in Earth languages. Theassian voices answered with their own harmonized chants. For a moment, the plaza felt like the heart of a new galaxy. Zorian leaned close enough that only she could hear. "They told me, when I was small, that my empathy made me too fragile to rule," he said, "that I would break under the weight of other minds." "You didn't," she said. "You learned to carry them, because you showed me how to live with all that feeling instead of shutting it out," he replied. "You taught me that power built on fear is brittle. Power built on care endures." "They're going to make inspirational holodramas out of us," she muttered. "I hope they at least get my good side." "I will personally veto any production that doesn't," he said dryly. As they turned back to the crowd, Sarah's thoughts drifted backward one last time. To that first corridor on Epsilon Station. To a mop and a bucket, and a human woman who refused to let the universe tell her she was insignificant. To the moment an alien emperor placed his child into her arms and changed everything. She had wanted, back then, to keep one kid safe. Instead, she had helped rewrite an empire. Down in the plaza, she spotted Jason pushing through the crowd, laughing and crying at once, his medical robes wild with motion. Somewhere in another star system, human children would grow up never knowing what shock collars felt like. They'd study alien physiology in class. They'd dream of becoming starship captains, scientists, artists, not just workers. Not a bad result for a janitor, she said softly. Not a bad result for a human, Zorian corrected, who never stopped loving too loudly in a world that told her to be quiet. The ceremony ended in a storm of celebration. Later that night, a recording of the event went up on human social channels across space. Someone edited the whole saga, Earth's conquest, Sarah's journey, Zorian's reforms, into a long storytime video, complete with subtitles, dramatic music, and reaction clips. And if you're here at the end of this retelling, listening all the way through this sci-fi drama about a human janitor, an alien prince, and an empire that learned how to care, don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments, whether you loved it or hated it. Your feedback helps shape future stories and future worlds.